A lot of people have gotten really excited for the upcoming Riot MMO, and it's to be expected. Riot has two of the largest free-to-play games in the world with League of Legends and Valorant. They have arguably the largest esport in the world with League of Legends. Valorant is a really big esport as well. And they just last year released a hit show with Arcane based around League of Legends. If you're on the outside looking in, the League of Legends MMO sounds great, and it seems like Riot is doing great as well. So, what's the problem? Well, unfortunately, if you've been paying attention to Riot over the last few years, you know Riot is not in a great state. It's a bloated company with excessive and often incompetent timelines, and lots of employees have been leaving for years in large numbers. All this spells disaster for the upcoming MMO, which was announced over 2 years ago. It still has no gameplay, no trailers, or even any news in sight. And what a lot of people will say is just let them take their time. And I want to address that with just talking about Riot's timelines in general. So, if we look at Arcane, the animated show that Riot made around the League of Legends universe, it took them 6 years, 6 long years, they say, to create Arcane. Uh, which doesn't seem that bad, right? It's a whole show. They had never made an animation before, or like an animated TV show, so that seems okay. But Arcane is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Riot's long wait times to do basically anything. If we look at their latest game, in Valorant, this article was in 2020, and this was around the release of the beta of Valorant. And the lead game designer for Valorant had said that development took them 6 years, or the game had been in development for 6 years. And in case you don't know, Valorant is basically just a CSGO knockoff. It has the CSGO guns. Its main map designer was a map creator for CSGO. It's pretty much the same thing, just with new agents and abilities. And it took them 6 years to create the beta of Valorant. Now, let me show you what the beta of Valorant came out with. So, it came out with 8 characters. They each have around 4 abilities. They came out with numerous weapons, which they're really just the CSGO weapons. And it came out with 4 maps. So, let's put this in perspective. It took them 6 years to make a knockoff of CSGO with 8 characters and 4 maps. If we compare this to an MMO, let's say, things start to look pretty bad. Imagine how many zones and areas there are in an MMO. And I would argue that a zone in an MMO is probably more complicated to make than a map. You have very clear ideas with a FPS map of where players are going to go, how the map's going to play out. A zone, you kind of just have to make into a sandbox area. And remember, Valorant came out with 4 maps on release. If any MMO comes out with just 4 zones on release, it'll be laughed at. So you have to think, how many zones are they going to have to make? And then we also can compare it to, or the agents to classes in an MMO. For example, an MMO like WoW has 36 specs. An MMO like Final Fantasy, they have 20 jobs. So let's just say, the Riot MMO is not going to start with all this, or it's not going to start with the same amount, but let's just say they have like 15 classes, or maybe even just 10. Well, Valorant had 8 agents on release with 4 abilities each. Compare that to any class in any modern MMO, and they usually have a lot more than 4 abilities, and you're going to need more than 8. So this is not even including all the other systems in an MMO. Things like gearing, things like NPCs, voicing. You have to have a lot more voice acting than FPS. The item system. How are items going to work? How are bosses going to work? The soundtrack of the game. How are you going to get all the music? I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that an MMO would be at least 5 times more complicated than Valorant. Probably up to 10 times more complicated. Now, obviously, even if it's 5 times more complicated, it won't take exactly 5 times more time. It's not going to take the MMO 30 years to come out. But this is one of the reasons that I think the MMO is either going to be extremely bare bones on its launch, or it'll just get canceled. And this is not just with Valorant either for Riot. In case you didn't know, Riot is actually making a fighting game. Here's the latest video, it was released a month ago. This game actually has some gameplay that they've shown. Now, in total, for their fighting game, we've seen 2 stages and 4 or 5 characters. So, how long do you think it took Riot to show 5 characters and 2 stages? 1 year, 2 years, maybe even 3. You know, it can take a long time to make a fighting game, or any game really. No, none of that's true. It's taken them 7 years to show this. And what I mean by that is the company Rising Thunder, they made, or not Rising Thunder, actually, Radiant Entertainment. They made a fighting game called Rising Thunder, and then Riot bought them. This article is from 2016, 7 years ago. It's taken Riot 7 years after buying this company, which their fighting game is based off, or the same people who made this fighting game are making theirs. It's taken them 7 years to show 5 characters and 2 stages. The stage is just an image, basically a background, and 5 characters are, you know, a character is probably similar to a class in WoW. So if you think about it, it's been 7 years for 2 images and 5, let's say, classes. So their timelines for their games are extremely long. Much longer than basically any other gaming, well, much longer than any other well-managed gaming company in the industry. And finally, we can just look at their work on League of Legends. League of Legends itself recently had an update for a character named Ahri. And this update, it was just a visual update of sorts, and it was announced exactly like 1 year ago, pretty much. And it just came out. Let's see what they updated. Okay, so this is one. This is called the splash art, by the way. It's the art for the character, and these are different skins. So this is the second one. There's been 2 skins that have changed. Okay, this one's different, so now that's 3. This one is a 4th, that's different. Okay, so 4. That's the same. That's the same. That is also the same. That is the same. Oh, they really did not update a lot. Oh, and this looks the same too. So, in case you weren't counting, they updated 4 of the splash arts. 4 images. Took them 1 year to update these 4 images. And, you know, the real question you have to ask is, okay, why does it take Riot so long to do this stuff? And I actually have a couple of clips by the former CEO of CLG, which is a franchise team in Riot's NA competitive league for League of Legends. So here's the first clip. Listen to.
Well, we have these LAN cafes that we build in Riot within the company. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, and then Rioters play with other Rioters. They play League of Legends on LAN after work or during work. Because at Riot Games, you never have to be caught working. I walk through Riot Games, and it's this open workspace, and there's people playing Diablo 3, there's people grinding, there's like very little actual work going on because they claim to be results-based, but nobody actually tracks the KPIs. Anyway, so I said, okay, so there's LAN cafes. She goes, yeah, there's LAN cafes. And I said, okay, then what is it you do? And she goes, well, it's because we have 4,000 employees, I introduce teams to other teams at Riot, and then they play League of Legends against each other to increase workplace coefficiency. And I'm like, do you do anything else? And she's like, no, that's my job. It's full time. And I was like, holy shit, dude.
So actually, Riot has even more employees now at 4,500 plus. But here's another clip on the same subject as well.
I would walk through these hallways, and then I'd stop at a random desk, and I would meet a person. And I'd be like, what do you do? And they would be like, well, I design champions. And I'm on a team of like 300 or 400 people. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. And I'm like, what champions have you designed? And they're like, well, I designed like the curvature of Draven's axe. And it took me 6 months. And I was like, what? like, that's all you did? And I'm like, how much do you work? And they're like, I'm generally here like 10 or 12 hours a day. And I'm like, this is fucking crazy. I literally felt like I was I was like being put in an insane asylum where I was the only crazy one and everyone else was normal. But I felt that I was going crazy. I would think that I was getting fucking gaslighted because I couldn't fathom how a person worked 12 hours a day and didn't do anything. It was fucking crazy, dude.
That's just some info on the workspace of Riot, the work environment. And honestly, it seems pretty good. Imagine you work there, you get paid, you just play games all day. You know, it sounds like a good thing for the employees. They have Riot has over 4,500 employees, but somehow they have the worst timelines, and really out of any gaming company, they take the longest. So now the question is, okay, why is the work environment like this? You know, is it management? What's going on? And something that I want to bring up about Riot's work environment is actually their lawsuit. Because this was in 2018 when this broke, way before the Blizzard lawsuit. Long time ago. Feels like a long time ago. But current and former employees sued Riot Games for gender discrimination for a lot of the same things as the more recent Blizzard lawsuit. And this might not seem like a big deal because, you know, I guess basically every video game company has been sued for this, which is not good, but that's just, I guess, the culture of these companies. And what is really interesting about this lawsuit is actually when we compare it to the more recent Blizzard lawsuit. So this lawsuit came out in 2018, and just recently, the end of 2021, Riot Games agreed to pay $100 million in the settlement for the class action lawsuit. So if you do the math, it took them around 3 years to settle this lawsuit. So I don't know what their lawyers are doing. I guess they're also working on Riot time, but it took a long time. If we compare it to Blizzard, they took less than a year to settle their lawsuit for $18 million. And actually, when we think about it too, what's with these amounts? Blizzard's lawsuit, it was hard to read. It had a lot of graphic details that even culminated in one woman killing herself. And they're paying an 18 million lawsuit. When you compare it to Riot Games as 100 million, you know, there aren't a ton of details on what happened at Riot Games, at least compared to the Blizzard one. But you have to imagine if they're paying 5 times more than Blizzard, it must have been real bad. So there's even more recent news of Riot just not being a great place to work, to be honest. Here's a screenshot of an employee who was terminated by Riot. So I'll read this out. It says, Rito, which is a nickname for Riot, terminated me knowing my wife was just diagnosed with breast cancer, knowing my father just died of COVID. My manager fought for me but was cut out of the decision. Narrative was and is seen as disposable. When we asked for more, they let us go. So this guy was a narrative writer. He worked on the lore for League of Legends, and he wrote a lot of good lore. If you don't know about, you know, any of the champions, this probably will not make much sense to you, but he wrote lore for champions like Pike, Ornn, Echo from Arcane, Kindred, Aurelion Sol, and a lot of these champions are really beloved by a lot of players, especially their lore. And it's just very strange because when you think about it, if you're working at Riot and you see your coworker, his wife gets diagnosed with breast cancer, his father died, and he just gets cut, and no one cares, no one bats an eye, then it doesn't feel like it'd be a great place to work. It can't feel good to seeing your coworker being cut like that. And it also shows a complete disinterest in lore of Riot, which, let's be honest, most people who play League of Legends don't care about their lore. But when you're making an MMO, lore, narrative, this stuff does matter for a lot of people. Just the general world itself matters a lot for an MMO, a lot more. And it's actually interesting because this guy was cut in 2021, and this year, 2022, Riot has released almost zero lore or anything for League of Legends. You could say maybe they're working all on the MMO, so they just put it all there, but it seems like a strange strategy to just stop expanding the world that your MMO is going to take place in. And now what I want to talk about actually is Riot's track record with games, because they don't actually have a perfect track record. One of the games Riot has made is a card game called Legends of Runeterra. And this card game, as you can see, it has 1,000 viewers, or less than 1,000 viewers on Twitch. And it's kind of just a flop, if we're being honest. If we compare this to its biggest competitor, Hearthstone, we can see Hearthstone right now is 20k viewers on Twitch. And the thing about Legends of Runeterra is it's a card game, and you can't really just copy other card games. You usually need some twist, some spin to make your own card game. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about, because Riot, what are their successful games? League of Legends, a copy of Dota, and it was Valorant, which is a copy of CSGO. And I don't think copying is bad, by the way, because I like both League and Valorant more than their counterparts or the things they came from. But it's just that when Riot doesn't have a base to work off, we can see that it doesn't always lead to success, like Legends of Runeterra. You can't just copy a card game and all its mechanics one for one, because people will just stick with the original. So when they go on their own, they don't actually have a flawless track record. And this is worrying for the MMO, because let's be honest, that if the MMO releases and it's just a copy of WoW or Final Fantasy, then it'll be successful. League is big enough to be successful, but it won't be that revolutionary MMO that everyone's hoping for. It won't be the game that people are anticipating and want. It won't be anything new. It'll just be a copy that'll probably reduce friction points in the genre. It'll probably be free, so you don't have to pay a sub price or whatever, and it'll be popular, but it won't be anything great. And that's all I have to say about this. I think the League of Legends MMO, things aren't looking good for it. How long Riot takes to develop their games, it's either going to be, it's going to take 8-10 years to develop, which by then, I don't know if the hype will even still be there. And it also, I don't think, will be a revolutionary game. It won't have much new. If we look at Riot's previous games, they're often just kind of skinned or reskins of other games, copies, and they just reduce friction points and make, the game more accessible, which is a valid strategy, but it's not anything remarkable. So that's going to be it from me. Thanks for watching this whole video. If you like this deep dive and want to see more content analyzing the game history, then go ahead and like and subscribe.